These days, I would now request Advocate Ashutosh Thakkar to kindly invite and welcome C.A. Jigar Shah with a book. Advocate Ashutosh Thakkar sir to kindly welcome C.A. Jigar Shah sir along with the memento. I now invite C.A. Vishwesh Shah sir to kindly welcome Dr. Avinash Podar. With a I request Advocate Dhruven Shah sir to kindly invite and welcome C.A. Priyam Shah. Kartikeya Shah to formally welcome Advocate Samir Sidpuria. And finally, I request C.A. Ashish Tekwani sir to kindly come forward and welcome C.A. Punit Prajapati. Thank you, sir. Now, I take this opportunity to welcome our esteemed dignitaries by introducing them, starting with C.A. Jigar Shah, sir. C.A. Jigar Shah is a fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and a law graduate from Gujarat University. Mr. Shah is a member of Committee of Indirect Taxes, Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry for 7 years now. He has contributed many lectures and seminars organized by ICAI across Gujarat. Presently working as a partner in Lakshmi Kumar and Sridharan attorneys at Ahmedabad office, Mr. Shah regularly appears before CESTAT Ahmedabad and Gujarat High Court with a rich experience of consulting Indian corporate groups and MNCs. Let's welcome C.A. Jigar Shah sir with a huge round of applause. Next, it is my privilege to invite Dr. C.A. Avinash Podar, sir. His education qualification include BCom, CA, LLB, and Diploma in Information System Audit. Currently pursuing PhD too. Currently practicing as an advocate in the field of indirect taxes, commercial laws, and cybercrime. Dr. Podar specializes in representing litigation pertaining to indirect taxation before appeals, CESTAT and Settlement Commission, and also Authority of Advanced Ruling Authority. Author of many books, namely Glimpses of GST, Service Tax Made Simple, Indirect Tax Manual, Dr. Podar has also launched a website for updates about the service tax and GST. He is also a promoter of Tarun Group, who is actively involved into software and is pioneer in the field of digital certificates and cloud-based taxation software. Let's welcome with a huge round of applause, Dr. C.A. Avinash Podar. Next, I take this opportunity to invite C.A. Priyam Shah sir. Honorable C.A. Priyam Shah sir is a successful chartered accountant practicing in the field of taxation since 1998. He has been a regional council member of WIRC and of ICAI for the 2 terms 2013 and 2019. He is a regular speaker at various seminars and contributed articles in CA journals. Please welcome with a huge round of applause C.A. Priyam Shah sir. I now take the opportunity to introduce Advocate Samir Sidpuria sir. Honorable Advocate Samir Sidpuria sir is a successful advocate practicing in indirect taxes and appearing in litigation before various appellate authorities. He is a regular speaker at various seminars, and his achievement is to deliver more than 277 presentations across Gujarat in the aspects of GST. He has also contributed articles in sales tax journals. Please welcome with a huge round of applause Advocate Samir Sitpuria, sir. And finally, I would like to introduce CA Punit Prajapati, sir. Honorable CA Punit Prajapati is a successful chartered accountant practicing in the field of indirect taxes for more than 13 years. He remained a member of Indirect Tax Committee of various professional bodies. He is a regular speaker at various seminars and has contributed articles in various journals and also co-authored a book. Let's hear it for CA Punit Prajapati, sir. I now request the dignitaries to take over the session.
25 પોઝર રાખેલા છે. પોઝર્સ અમે 5-5 વહેંચેલા છે. પોઝર્સનું સ્ટાર્ટિંગ એ રીતે કરીએ તો પહેલો પોઝર્સ વિલ બી રિપ્લાય બાય જીગરભાઈ. ફર્સ્ટ 6, 11, 16 and 21 will be replied by Jigar. Second, 7th will be replied by Samir onwards. Third, 8th and onwards I reply by myself. પછી પુનિતભાઈ ચોથો નવમો એ રિપ્લાય કરશે અને અવિનાશભાઈ 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th and 25th એ રીતે રિપ્લાય કરશે જેથી કરીને ઝડપથી આપણે પતાવી શકીએ. ટાઈમ બી શોર્ટ છે. જીગરભાઈ યુ સ્ટાર્ટ.
Poser is basically related to charitable activities, philanthropic activities we are doing. So as a part of these corporate social responsibilities on the part of the corporates, they have to donate something. They have to carry out certain activities, which is the larger benefit of the societies. And under the Income Tax Act, in the legislation says that it should not be connected with your business and profession. So many of the companies, what do? They will contribute towards the construction of a building of a school. Some would say that construction of a hospital and then providing this ambulance and all. And then you must have seen that it is written that this is contributed by, say for example, ABC Limited. So somebody can say that why you are incurring this expenditure, because you are getting the advertisement of your brand name done. So ultimately you are sponsoring this activity and therefore you have received the sponsorship services, and sponsorship services, the tax is to be paid on a reverse charge basis on the recipient. So you have given this, donated this, so this is a problem. And not only this, you give free goods, like in pandemic, many of your clients would have given this kind of food packet, etc. to the needy people. There they must have printed also that it is contributed by so and so company. So can somebody say that you have done this for the purposes of advertisement and therefore it's a sponsorship services you have received and you pay tax under reverse charge? Now first thing is, the tax is on supply under GST. Section 7 says that the supply, the phrase supply would include, it's an including definition, all forms of supply, and then says that sale, barter, exchange, transfer, done for a consideration in course or furtherance of business. So consideration should be there. When I am donating something, I am giving as a free. I am not expecting any benefit out of that. What do you mean by consideration? In many of the decisions, Supreme Court has interpreted this Latin term, quid pro quo. You do something for me, I will pay you. So that is called a consideration. Here, there is no element of consideration is present. They have issued a circular also. Circular says that if it is simply for the philanthropic purposes, you are not expecting anything out of the return. Merely by printing your name, many of us have donated to the temples, and temples will give the nameplate that this much amount is donated by this company, this person. The CBIC circular says that all these activities are not per se for any consideration because there is an absence of return. So this will not fall into any supply. So they have clarified very emphatically on this, that this will not be considered as supply and no tax is payable. The second part of my poser is, it says that if suppose it is written that it is contributed by ABC Limited, a largest manufacturer of this. Let us take an example. It says that this ambulance is contributed by Colgate Palmolive, a largest manufacturer of toothpaste and toothbrushes. Then the Colgate intends to recognize the mind of a people that why I am doing, because I am the largest manufacturer of toothpaste and toothbrush. So my product is getting advertised. If suppose this type of phrase is written on an ambulance, then it is not for a philanthropic or a donative purposes. It will be considered as a supply and tax is payable. So merely if you look at like Blind People's Association, they display the board of the donor that this month the highest donor of amount is this. All those things are not any consideration for services. But however, if you start recognizing your product or your supply of services goods in any way, then it will get connected with the consideration and that may get taxed. So this is a thin line difference in this posture. If you recognize your product or services with the donation, then it may be taxable. Otherwise, there is no tax. That is what the conclusion is. You can note down any questions if you have on this. Further deliberation is required. Subject to permissibility of time, we will discuss further also.
Good evening, everyone. The second poser is relating to this retrospective amendment which is going to be done in the CGST and SGST Act. In the recent central budget, the scope of definition, section 7 of supply is going to be increased. Basically, as of now, the definition of supply given section 7 of supply do not cover the concept of mutuality. After judgment, in case of a Kolkata club, concept of mutuality under the service tax era, Supreme Court held that in a case of a concept of mutuality, tax cannot be levied because there is no supply of service. Thereafter, to overcome the judgment of the service tax era of a Kolkata club, this amendment has been proposed under the GST Act. Pursuant to that amendment, the query posed as to activity covered by the scope of supply will require GST registration. In other words, as and when, if from 1st April 2021, association of person as per definition of supply become a taxable person, whether that association of person is required registration or not, that is the first poser. My answer to that poser is it is advisable to take a registration because the definition of a supply is going to be a very wider, and that's why whereas there are association of person is there, it is advisable to take a registration. However, you have to refer the basic exemption of the GST Act, that is the 20 lakhs exemption. If by supply of service your aggregate turnover is not going to be exceeded, even though you become a taxable person, but your aggregate turnover do not exceed 20 lakhs rupees, then you are not supposed to take registration number. Second exemption is available under notification number 12, entry 77, which speaks that in a case of a residential welfare society, if monthly amount from the members is less than 7,500, then it is an exempt supply of service. So there, in that case also, you are not supposed to take registration. Rest in all cases, it is as advisable to take a registration. The second poser is retrospective enactment of section 7(1)(a) to overcome the Supreme Court judgment given under the service tax in case of Kolkata is a permissible. There are many retrospective legislation under the direct tax as well as under the indirect tax also. So the legislature have a power to make an enactment with the retrospective effect. That's not a new thing in Indian taxation. So there are no final conclusion. As and when the Supreme Court is giving any favorable judgment, the legislation, we are expecting the legislation will be changed by the lawmaker parliament. So that is a permissible, retrospective enactment can be a permissible. Still, we have to see the actual notification, what is the wording of the notification. After the notification, we can come to know how this section 7(1)(a) will affect us. Each taxpayer needs to pay past liability. So far as our opinion is, in a case of a past liability, let's say any association or person is liable from 1st July 2017 to till 31st, for that period they have not collected any tax. And this amendment is going to be introduced from retrospective effect. To answer to that poser is, you have to still challenge on a similar ground where the Calcutta Club case is fought with the Supreme Court, so far as past liability is concerned, because this definition, the section 7(1)AA is going to be amended. Still concept of mutuality is there, and based on that judgment you can say. Secondly, there is no consideration, there is no supply of service at all. So that's why in that line, so far as past liability is concerned, you can still fight on similar base, similar to Calcutta Club. Thereafter, even if somebody will liable to pay tax, then it should be paid only tax amount only. Because so far as provision of an interest under section 50 subsection 1 is there, according to us, no need to pay interest on this, because liability will be effect due to this retrospective legislation. So it is advisable to, as and when you receive the notice, you just pay the tax, don't pay the interest. And can the person who become a liable from retrospective effect is entitled to claim an ITC for the past period, that is from 1st July 2017 till 31st March 2021? The answer is yes. Basically, you have to see section 16(2), section 16(4) restrict us, but it is in a special case. But where I am not registered at all, and from a retrospective effect, law become me, due to that retrospective enactment, I become a taxable person. That's why for past period also, we have to fight and we have to claim a credit. Although you have to face a litigation, and this issue will be settled with the High Court and Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
The only thing I would just like to support that yes, ITC can be claimed, but when we discuss this provision in another posers for 16(4), I think then the idea will get clear that whether the credit can be claimed today for all the past invoices or not.
Third poser is for me. Before I go to the poser, let me thank on behalf of all the trustees to both the association who has invited us for the views on these posers. Posers we have discussed in a group, and whatever reply we are giving is of our group consensus. So it may happen that in future you may not be inclined to have the same view, but this is our group view, right? Now the question which has been allotted to me is the case where a company who is manufacturer of goods had a fire in a factory, and finished goods which was manufactured is lost in fire. We have the block credit section is section 17(5), which says that if anything, notwithstanding anything contained in section 16(1), if the goods has been lost or stolen or destroyed, the input tax credit will not be available. Now the question is, section 16(1) માં જે credit લઈએ છે, that credit we are taking of the raw material or the services. Now the same has been consumed in manufacturing of the goods, and ultimately finished goods has been produced. Now what is lost is finished goods, not the raw material. And finished goods, on the goods which has been lost is finished goods on which no credit has been claimed. So that is the question, whether I need to reverse the ITC on this finished goods which has been lost in fire. Those who are practicing from the VAT regime, they must be having the similar case of Himani distributor, where we have a tribunal judgment and the High Court judgment also, that to the extent that we are compensated with the insurance amount, we need to reverse the same, and to the extent which has not been compensated, we does not require to reverse. That is under the VAT regime. But under the GST, fortunately on a similar point, we have the advance ruling from the Gujarat VAT Authority in the case of Jai Chemical Industry, where they have the fire of and their chemical finished goods, H acid has been destroyed, vinyl acid has been destroyed. Now they have asked the similar question, whether they need to reverse the ITC. The advance ruling authority says, yes, you need to reverse the ITC, because ultimately intention is anything which has been destroyed or lost, otherwise then the supply, you cannot claim the input tax credit. Right. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Fourth poser is practical questions we are facing day to day. And ABC Limited has a factory building in a GIDC, and he is going to sell this factory. In general terms, we use the term sell, but actually speaking, legally speaking, GIDC don't sell the plot. It actually gives that plot to the owners at a 99-year lease. So what an owner gets is a lease period over 99 years and not the title over the land in a GIDC. Now the question will arise is, when he is reselling this unit to somebody else, which definitely he is free to do, in that case, as he is not selling the land per se, but he is merely getting a money consideration for the remaining period of a lease or right over that period. So the question is whether that is subject to GST or not. In this scenario, everything is subject to GST now, because if it is a goods, it is subject to GST. If it is a service, it is subject to GST, and service means other than goods. So everything is subject to GST. Means even if anything which is not goods, that is also subject to GST. A right is also subject to GST. So, legally speaking, yes, it can be argued that such a consideration is subject to GST. I am not going into a litigation that whether a right in a land is also a land or not, because that is a question, a constitutional question, and I don't want to go into that. So, we assume that this is not the land per se. In these circumstances, it will be subject to GST. In this scenario, or particularly in this case, what is happening is, he is getting that factory building is already there. So, he can say that I am also selling a factory building, 50 lakh rupees. So, whether that will be subject to GST or not. So, it is also it is a building which is already there. It is an immovable property. I don't think there will be the levy of a GST on a sale of a building, even if it is lying on the leased land. So that will not subject to GST. So 50 lakh will not be subject to GST. 1 crore will be subject to GST. There is one exemption notification, notification number 12/2017, entry number 41, which says that if there is a longer lease and that GIDC is getting a 30-year or more lease period and getting that premium for that, in that case that will not be subject to GST. But that exemption is a qua assessee, means if a GIDC is selling such a land or giving that land on lease, then and then only that exemption is available. But if anybody other than that Industrial Development Corporation is selling such a land, in that case it will not be that exemption may not be available. There is now another question which will arise is whether a buyer XYZ Limited, suppose the tax is payable and he is also paying the tax. Now buyer XYZ Limited can take an input tax credit on this. So that will be another issue. There is one appellate advance, appellate advance ruling in case of GGL, resorts and hotels. In that case, it is held that a lease rental which is paid before the construction stage and which is capitalized in the books, no ITC will be available. So here also, your auditor of an XYZ will not allow you to put this expenditure in the revenue. Definitely it will be capitalized in the books of accounts. So department will say that, sir, now we have an advance ruling, even an appellate authority has confirmed it. So no input tax credit is available to an XYZ Limited. But I don't think so. I think that here the building was already there. Under section 17(5), what is restricted is anything which is used for a construction of a building is is no ITC will be available. So here the building was already there. So whatever that amount which is paid to ABC Limited, it is not for construction of a building, and I don't think that that restriction under Section 17 will be barring taking of any ITC to XYZ Limited. Thank you very much.
Hello. Good evening to everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank the associations for giving me this opportunity, specifically Prem Bhai, and with the permission of all the experts and the seniors of the dais, I would like to mention one thing, that the poser which is given to me is something which has its own restrictions when I say time. Reason being, now I have to score 50 runs in 5 balls, which is next to impossible. So 86 capital B. Next poser is 86 capital B, and the applicability of the same to IGST and the compensation cess. Before answering this question, see, the best part is this is not litigated as on date. This is the newest provision, I would say, from 1st January 2021, which has been introduced in the statute books. Yes, it has been, the virus and the validity has already been challenged before the Honorable Gujarat High Court. We are anticipating the replies and then the further submissions, but let us presume, first and foremost, the question arises whether 86 capital B can be there in the rule book or not, whether it has the backup of the statute or not. To my belief, and with the limited understanding which I have, as per me, it has no statutory backup, because Section 49 deals with the payment of tax. It clearly emphasizes that yes, you can make the payment of tax if it is related to output supply or your liability which is arising from your outward supplies. The entire input tax credit balance which is there in the electronic credit ledger can be utilized for the purpose of payment of that tax which arises out of the output supply liability. And now this rule per se is restricting me for making the entire payment of that output tax liability subject to 99%. It says 1% has to be paid in cash. There are a lot of arguments which have been given by the departmental officers and the government that 99% of the assessees are out of 86 capital B. Now, coming back to the poser per se, if we presume that 86 capital B, being the law of the land, needs to be followed, then yes, I would say it is applicable to IGST also. Because then we are presuming that it has a statutory backup. It has the delegated legislature, which is 86 capital B, has the statutory backup of CGST Act or the Gujarat GST Act. And therefore, Section 20 of the IGST Act, which borrows the provisions of the CGST Act, will certainly make this rule valid rule for the purpose of IGST Act also. With this, thank you.
Avinash sir is right, because the Rule 2 of the IGST rules also borrows the provision of CGST rules, so for the purposes of Section 20 of the IGST Act. So it's perfectly correlated with each other, so it will be applicable.
Yes. Absolutely yes. If cess is presumed to be constitutionally valid, then yes.
Sir, you may be disappointed, but the answer is yes. See, the next poser is affecting so many persons who are providing the services in the nature of renting of immovable property services. The last 1 year has been a terrific year for all the businesses. Everybody has suffered. So basically what has happened, that this renting of immovable property services, since the businesses were down, the tenants have refused to pay the rent to the landlords. Now, if you look at the scheme of these services, in service tax also, there was a concept of continuous supply of services. So the same concept has been borrowed to GST also, that if you are going to provide the services for more than 3 months, then it will be considered as a continuous supply of services. Why this continuous supply of services is something different than the other services? Because generally what happens, you avail the repair and maintenance services, annual maintenance contract for your plant and machinery, air conditioners, etc. There, every month he will come and service. but you don't make the payment every month. Because your agreement says that you have to raise the invoice quarterly, half yearly, maybe yearly. So there is a rendition of the service, but you don't raise the invoice. Sometimes say that you will make the payment only on a quarterly, half yearly, yearly basis. Then the service provider is required to raise the invoice when you make the payment. If you look at that is the specific provision of a continuous supply of services. The time of supply is determined as per the terms of the contract. Now what has happened in these cases, because of the contract says that there is a force majeure clause. Force majeure means something which is beyond the control of the landlord or the tenant has happened, and there is a stoppage of the services. Now because of the lockdown imposed, the landlord could not provide the renting of immovable property services. The recipient will say that I have not received the services because I was prevented from enjoying the benefit of this service. So I will not pay. Now as a taxpayer, you must have filed your GSTR 1, GSTR 3B also, and may have paid the tax. Somebody may have not paid the tax, not considered this. Then how to deal with this situation? If you look at the invoice, tax invoice, section 2, subclause 66 defines the invoice or a tax invoice as is referred to in section 31. Up section 31 of the CGST Act deals with the raising of the invoice. Important section is section 15. Section 15, value of the supply. It says that price actually paid or payable. Now what will happen? This matter is under dispute. Tenant says, I have not enjoyed the benefit of the service, I will not pay. Landlord says that irrespective of all these things, you have to pay. This will be a subject matter, potential dispute between the landlord and the tenant. There is no certainty as of now. You can take resort to section 15 and say that what is the consideration value of a supply is price actually paid or payable, which is not determinable as of now. Therefore, there is no rendition of service because it's a continuous supply of service. Now, if you look at the section 31(5), which says that raising of the invoice in a case of a continuous supply of service, it says that if the payment is ascertainable from the contract when the tenant makes the payment. Tenant has not made the payment, therefore that particular event has not triggered. You are not supposed to raise the invoice at all. So the answer is, in this type of cases, you can very well take a stand that since there is no rendition of the service, and therefore I need not raise the invoice. Since I need not raise the invoice, I will not disclose in GSTR 1. GSTR 1 I have not shown, therefore I will not pay tax when I file the GSTR 3B also. So in this type of situation, if you have come across any problem with your client that the tenants are refusing to make payment, you can very well take this stand because section 50 says that price actually paid or payable. So there is a dispute. So as of now, it cannot be determined, and therefore there is no time of supply, and therefore no raising of the invoice. Section 13(2) specifically says that you have to see from the contract period prescribed. So you refer to the contract. Contract says that when he makes the payment, I will raise the invoice. Since he has not made the payment, I will not raise the invoice. So in the totality of the things, you can very well say that as of now, there is no GST liability. No, sir, because see, even if a half yearly liability is there, the tenant has refused to make the payment. Tenant has refused because he has invoked this force majeure clause. He says that service itself has not been rendered. So it is in dispute as of now. So the consideration itself is not determinable, value is not available, you cannot raise the invoice. That's the logic. That's okay, sir. Every quarter, see, say for example, some contract will say that monthly you have to raise the invoice, monthly you have to pay me the rent. But since he has invoked the force majeure clause, he says that I am disputing this rendition of the service. So your contract says that if the payment is ascertainable from the contract, in this case, payment itself is not there because the tenant has disputed. So that clause will not be invoked. Possession with... Sir, merely because merely because he is possessing the premises, it does not mean that he has enjoyed the services. Sir, that is the dispute. He says that is the dispute. He says that I was not been able to enjoy because of the circumstances beyond my control. Why the force majeure clause would be invoked? There is no dispute that he is in the possession of the property. He is in the possession of the property, but it does not mean he has enjoyed the benefit of the services. Sir, whatever. Sir, if he is of the possession of the shop, then goods also will be lying there. There is no dispute about that. But since he has disputed the rendition of the service, you can take this stand. You can take this stand.
The next poser it relates to the e-invoice provisions. The poser e-invoice is required to be generated as per Rule 48 sub Rule 4 for the supplier having aggregate turnover more than 100 CR. In relates to that, the poser is whether supplier is required to make physical or digital signature on e-invoice or not. Many a times what we will see is, generally when any supplier whose aggregate turnover is more than 100 crore, when he uploads the invoice on the e-invoice portal, then it should be digitally signed. Whatever INR number he is receiving, at that time it is a digital sign, invoice is there. But thereafter, many supplier is making cut paste of that INR number on his system based software to give his logo, because on an e-invoice portal the supplier cannot have a facility to print his logo. So as and when the supplier is printing the making cut paste of an INR number on his invoice, at that time the supplier is not making digital or physical invoice. Quoting the proviso to Rule 36, which speaks that no signature is required on the e-invoice. So basically, the proviso which give an exemption of making a signature on e-invoice is a different proviso. It speaks that whatever exemption is provided not to make signature on the invoice is related to e-invoice generated under Information Technology Act. The e-invoice which is generated under the GST Act, that cannot be considered an invoice under the provision of Information Technology Act. So that's why, as and when if we are receiving an invoice, it should be digitally or physically signed invoice. The e-invoice which are generated from the e-invoice website, it is a digitally signed invoice, but when there is a system-based invoice, that is not, many times it is written below the invoice, this is a system-generated invoice, and it should not be, it do not require signature. So that is not permissible. It should be there. Physical or digital signature must be there. The exemption which is given under the rule is for the e-invoice which is generated under the Information Technology Act. The e-invoice which is generated under the GST, it is not the e-invoice under the, cannot be considered as the invoice of the, under the Information Technology Act. So that is required to be keep in mind. The second poser is, during transit, if truck owner does not possess the physical copy of tax invoice, then to comply the condition of Rule 138A, IRN number can be considered as an tax invoice or not? The answer is yes. Rule 138A speaks that as and when any goods is traveling, at that time it must possess tax invoice, lorry receipt and e-way bill. These three documents are the mandatory document under the Rule 138A. If suppose e-invoice is generated and e-invoice is not with the lorry, the consignment, the transport vehicle, at that time you can give the digital IRN number which are available, and based on the digital tax invoice you can say that you can very well defend that no need to have a physical copy of a tax invoice as and when the truck has been inserted by the departmental persons. The third poser relates to that is, if e-invoice is generated, then e-way bill is required to be generated or not? Definitely both the e-invoice provision and e-way bill provision are a different provision, and therefore as and when if you generate an e-invoice, then you must have to generate e-way bill also. The last poser is, being a recipient, if we receive an e-invoice without signature of a supplier, then ITC can be availed on the said unsigned e-invoice or not. The answer is yes. Definitely you can, though the e-invoice is unsigned, then also you can avail an ITC on that unsigned e-invoice. Reason behind that is, if you refer the proviso to Rule 36(2), it speaks that you can very well avail an ITC if the invoice contain the tax charge, description of goods, total value of goods or service both, distinct number of supplier and recipient, and place of supply in case of an interstate supply. Thank you.
Next poser is 8. It says the PQR has availed the credit in excess of Rule 36(4), mean to say the wrong availment, but has not utilized the same in discharging the tax liability. Department had issued a notice for reversal of the same with interest. આ પ્રકારની નોટિસ અત્યારે બહુ બધાને આવી રહી છે, તમે બધાએ બી ફેસ કરી જશે. Now the only question is, there are two type of things. One is you have claimed the input tax credit as per your purchase register without checking 2A or now 2B, and out of that certain credit is not reflected in 2A, and the credit which has been claimed, we can say it is in excess of the limit which has been allowed under the rule. પહેલા 20% હતી, પછી 10% થઈ. Now there are two type of situation. One situation is you avail the credit and also utilize it. Another situation is you have availed it, you have claimed it, but you have not utilized in discharging your output tax liability. Now if second is the situation where you have claimed it and you have not availed or not utilized while discharging your tax liability, output tax liability, then interest is not leviable. And to support this view, we have the judgment of Patna High Court in case of Commercial Steel Engineering Corporation. The facts of the case was that they have claimed the wrong Trans 1 credit, and the same Trans 1 credit was not utilized by them in discharging the outward liability, or we can say they might not have the business during that course of time, and ultimately proved that it is required to be reversed. Department issued a notice that you need to reverse through the tax as well as discharge the interest liability also. But the court held that when the same has not been utilized, even though it is claimed, but it has not been utilized in discharging the tax liability, there is no need to pay the interest. And the para number 32 of the judgment is beautifully written. I am just reproducing the same. The judge says, in my opinion, the assistant commissioner of the state tax has somewhere got confused to treat the transitional credit claim by the dealer as an availment of the said credit, when in fact an availment of a credit is a positive act, and unless carried out for reducing any tax liability by its reflections in the return filed by the financier, it cannot be case of either availment or utilization. It means when you are not utilized in discharging your tax liability, even though you have claimed it, then also you does not require to pay the interest.
So can I supplement?
Yeah.
See, when I was listening to Uchit also, Uchit referred to one case of Mega Engineering of the Telangana High Court, where the court has said that no, interest is also payable. Now, if you look at section 50, how many of you are of the impression that after this amendment they have carried out in section 50, if the credit is not utilized, then interest is not payable? Whomsoever is carrying that impression may be wrong, because what they have done, they have not considered this type of situation where in a general course you are utilizing the credit in excess. They have made the provision only for the purposes of filing of a GSTR 3B return. If you are filing your GSTR 3B return belatedly, then only you have to pay interest only on the cash liability to be paid. They are not covering the general situation where in a routine course of business you are availing the credit in excess of 36(4) you are utilizing. In that case, this section 50, the proviso to section 50 is not protecting you at all. There's a very, very crookery provision. They have done it very deliberately. They are saying that only in a case where you are filing your GSTR 3B return belatedly, in that case only you have to pay the interest on a cash portion, not on these. In general course, it is not applicable. Now the another side of this provision is, if you look at section 50 says that every person who is liable to pay tax in accordance with the provisions of these act or the rules made thereunder but fails to pay the tax or any part thereof to the government within the period prescribed shall, for the period for which the tax or part remains unpaid, you pay interest. Now when this if you look at this plain reading of this section, it does not cover the situation where you are utilizing the credit excessively. There is no independent provision in section 50 at all. Now you go to section 73 and 74, which are the recovery mechanism in two different circumstances. It says that if interest is payable under section 50, then you pay. But for interest, you still have to refer to section 50. Section 50 is not taking care of this situation at all, where you have utilized, you have availed the credit, utilized in excess. My answer to this is, not only in a case where you are not utilized, even if you are utilized, there is no provision for charging interest. Why I am saying so, in earlier Senvet credit rules also this problem occurred. I don't know whether Uchit referred to the judgment of this Ind Swift of Supreme Court. Supreme Court says that availed or utilized. Yes. Therefore, any of the event, if you have availed, which was not your entitlement, then also you pay interest. Okay. Section 73, 74, both are using the same language, availed or utilized. So therefore, your interest liability could be there. But section 50, paramount section, which levies interest, is totally silent. In Senvet credit rules, they were also aware, the legislator, they were also aware that this type of situation could be there. If you look at Rule 14(1) Roman 2, where you have utilized the Senvet credit in excess of your entitlement, then it specifically said that we will apply the provisions of section 73, which is the demand of service tax, and section 75, which is the demand of interest, mutatis mutandis to this rule. Means they borrowed the provision of demanding the interest and tax as good as it's a demand of tax itself. That particular provision is totally absent here. So they don't have any power to levy interest in a case where you have utilized this credit excessively. So don't worry. That is what my view.
So just I would like to supplement to your view, if permission is granted. I 100% agree with this, because there is no provision per se which says reversal of any credit which is wrongly utilized or availed. Any interest is not applicable. 50 subsection 1, subsection 2, not speaking anything. 50 subsection 3 speaks about 42 and 43. That is not applicable, that is not effective as on date. So, technically speaking, yes, no need to worry.
So, forget about any subsection of the section 50.
Correct.
Entire section 50 is not applicable.
Nothing is applicable.
So trustees don't trust each other. So it is up to you whether you, so it is up to you whether you should trust the trustees or not. Client should be confused.
That was our
we
purpose.
Should not be confused. Now coming to the poser number 9. Generally what happens is, આપણે જોઈએ છે કે ઈ-વે બિલના વાયોલેશનમાં ગાડી પકડાય એટલે પૈસા ભર્યા વગર છૂટકો નથી. તો એવામાં બે રીતના કેસીસ જોઈએ છે. ઘણીવાર આપણને ઓફિસર કહે છે કે ટેક્સ અને પેનલ્ટી ભરી દો, એટલે 18+18 ભરી દો, ગાડી લઈ જાઓ, પછી લડતા રહેજો. અનધર ઇશ્યુઝ ઇઝ ઓર ક્વેશ્ચન એમાં જોઈએ છે કે ના, તમે ગુડ્સના 50% પણ વધારાના ભરો અને પછી ગાડી છોડાવજો. કરેક્ટ? સો in nutshell, section 129 says that on payment of a tax plus 100% penalty, goods can be released. Correct? And section 130 says that goods can be confiscated. Confiscation means now it is an ownership of the government. If your goods are confiscated, section 130 is applied, it means that it is an ownership of the government itself. Correct? So, if section 130 is applied, there will be a higher amount of penalty, and if 130 is applied, there may not, the question is, section 129 says that 14 days should be given to you so that you can pay the penalty plus tax and get your goods released. But if section 130 is applied, the question is whether the giving of 14 days is a compulsory or not. Can an officer say that at a right or very first moment itself, that no, I will not allow you the 14 days time to pay, I am right now confiscating the goods, and now if you want to release, you want your goods back, pay the penalty under section 130, or fine in fact under section 130. So we need to understand what is the difference between both the sections. Section 129 is applicable for each and every type of a violation of an e-way bill or any other document which are required to be carried along with the transportation. Section 130 is applicable when there is an intention to evade the tax. So if there is an intention to evade the tax, an officer can sideline the section 129 and directly can jump to section 130, means direct confiscation without waiting for a 14 days. Correct? Both the sections, section 129 and 130, start with notwithstanding anything contained in any other provision of this act. Section 129 and 130 both starts with the same. So non-obstant clause is prevailing in both the sections. So the doubt was, can officer do this? Can officer bypass the 129 and directly jump to 130? So fortunately we have one judgment of a synergy in Gujarat High Court which says that when there is an intention to evade the tax, direct, I know sir, you will be given a chance sir. Supreme Court you are talking about, synergy is state? Okay, sorry. So section 1, synergy says that Gujarat High Court, generally it should not be done unless there is an intention to evade the tax. And if there is an intention to evade that, it doesn't mean that merely a suspicion, but a reason should be recorded in a writing, in an order, that there is why there is a doubt that why there is a reason that there is an intention to evade the tax. So if there is an intention to evade the tax, definitely you can jump to, officer can jump to section 130 without giving you an option under 129. But if there is no intention, it is very clear that you cannot bypass the 129. And now we have also another judgment of an Andhra Pradesh High Court, which also on the similar line. So we have two different High Court having the same view. Fortunately, or for the clarity of the law, this budget, there is one proposal which says that non-obstant clause from 130 is going to be removed from the approval of this budget, or any date which will be notified thereafter. Thank you very much.
Next poser is with relation to the practical issues that we all are facing so far as fake invoices are concerned. What various officers are taking as a stand is that they are not challenging the input tax credit that you have wrongly availed. They are not challenging 16(2) conditions not being fulfilled. They are directly imposing the penalty under section 122. They are issuing a show cause notice under section 122. Now I am not going into the question whether section 122 show cause notice can be directly issued or not, whether the section contemplates that kind of powers, or we will have to come back to section 73 and 74 for the purpose of levying the penalty. I am not on that issue. The issue is, can the officer who has issued a notice under section 122 subsection 1 for levying a penalty of 100%, after issuing the order, adjudication order, and confirming the liability of penalty, leviability of penalty rather, attach or rather provisionally attach your properties or bank account under section 83. Now to be on a lighter side, anything and everything can be attached as per the latest amendment of section 83. Not only the property of the taxpayer but also the property of we consultants. Anything can happen. And again to be on a lighter side, that will be safer course. And again to be on a lighter side, I would like to mention that they don't need to explain anything, because every now and then they are repeating the same mistakes. The courts are being harsh on them, but again and again the same kind of mistakes is being happening, because there is no provision in the law which says that how to penalize an officer if he is taking a step wrong, and which is apparently wrong. So unfortunately no comment on that. But yes, the question lies, can 83 be invoked? See, if we read it plainly, it says when there is a pendency in a proceeding under few sections, which is 62, 63, 64, 67, 73 or 74. Now there is no pending proceeding. Had it been a question that the adjudication has not happened to section 122 show cause notice, even in that case, the attachment of the property or the bank account was not possible. Nevertheless, in many of the cases, they have taken such kind of stake wherein they have attached the bank accounts, they have attached the properties of the taxpayers after adjudicating the case, adjudicating the matter under section 122. And my view to this poser would be absolutely without authority of law. They cannot attach provisionally any property or the bank account under section 83 after the issuance of any order. Forget about 122. If they adjudicate under section 73, even then they have the authority under section 79, they can go for recovery, but they cannot go for provisional attachment. So my only submission would be provisional attachment is a situation wherein any proceedings are pending as on date. See, it is a provision as on date which is standing. After the proposed amendment, if it gets notified, then the things are going to change drastically. Drastically, I mean like it's a draconian provision. Puri GST sab ek taraf aur ye 83 ek taraf. I would say 129, 130, all those provisions, 132 even. Because attaching my bank account, attaching my property is like taking away everything of a consultant. I'm not talking about the taxpayer. So, my answer would be no. The attachment is absolutely bad in law. It cannot happen. Thank you.
Avinash sir is absolutely right in saying that even the consultant's bank account can be attached. So far as the GST officer is concerned, it would be a safe bet because he may not be knowing that whether the SSC after doing all these fraudulent activities will be having any balance or not, but he would be sure that the consultant, GST consultant will be having the balance. This another poser is of general, we have some misconception when we are availing the service of a government or government departments. The service is provided by the government. If at all, if you consider this as a service, then it attracts a GST and a reverse charge. Now there are so many authorities. Generally, we have a conception that these are all government authorities, government departments, and therefore we are supposed to make the payment under reverse charge mechanism. And many of the issues you would have come across this mining sector that apart from the directly paying to the royalty to the government department, there are some district mineral boards, funds, they are created by the government, and our great authority for advance rulings are giving the rulings that the reverse charge would be applicable on those also. So all those things are going on. Now the question here is, if somebody pays the charges to Pollution Control Board, Gujarat Pollution Control Board, Central Pollution Control Board, or for that matter SEBI, ROC, and then this Competition Commission, you have to make the payment to all these authorities. Whether this is a payment to the government and it would attract the reverse charge or not. They have clarified, so far as these FAQs on government services are concerned, they have said that all these are not the government authorities, they are the separate authorities. This is not a government. So they are different than the government and therefore reverse charge would not apply. So somebody who is paying fees to Pollution Control Board or some other authority like a SEBI, CCI, all those things, they say that these are all not the government and therefore reverse charge would not apply because these are a service of a government. Now you look at section 7(2)(b), section supply. It says that when the government is acting as a public authority and central government issues a notification in this behalf, then it will not be considered as a supply of goods or services at all. It means if the government issues the notification, it will be at par with Schedule 3 of the GST Act, which says that these are all the activities which are not considered as a supply at all. Now, am I at the mercy of the government to wait that he will issue the notification and then I will get the exemption? If it is a sovereign function of the government, whether they are issuing the notification or not, why should I wait for the notification? It will not be considered as a service because, as I said, that quid pro quo will be absent. They are not doing any consideration or they are not performing any activity because I pay the fees to them. And in a very old decision of one Liberty Cinema, the Supreme Court has said that there could be nomenclature used as a fees, tax, I say service tax, excise duty, customs duty, goods and service tax. How these are all these different octroi? These are nomenclature used. Ultimately, they are recovering the tax. So, wherever the government is functioning as a sovereign authority, public authority, despite of that, there is no notification issued under section 7(2)(b), I can take a stand that I will not pay any tax because there is no service at all, supply at all. Right? Punit, we were discussing about this on that, this FSI, you can also throw some light on this. Okay, pause, sorry. Oh, okay. So that's all. So need not pay tax under reverse charge mechanism in all these activities. That was the point.
The next poser is in relates to the input tax credit. The supplier has supplied the service in financial year 17-18, 18-19 and 19-20. The supplier has raised an invoice in FY 2021. Then credit can be claimed by the recipient in FY 2021 looking to section 16.2 and section 16.4. Basically, there are interplay between the two events. See, we all know that section 16.2 having a certain condition that you must possess a tax invoice, you must have received the goods or services, you should have to make a payment within 180 days. These are the general conditions for the entitlement of input tax credit under the GST Act. Section 16.4 is putting a restriction on you that you must avail an input tax credit by the September of the relevant financial year. Here the event is, let's say કે આપણે કોઈને રિટર્ન ભરવાની સર્વિસ આપી. The service has been received by that person in relevant financial year અને આપણે બિલિંગ મોડું કરીએ છીએ. એટલે જ્યારે બિલ આપીએ છીએ ત્યારે એની પાસે રિસિપ્ટ ઓફ સર્વિસ નથી અને જ્યારે સર્વિસ લે છે ત્યારે એની પાસે બિલ નથી. સો ઇન ધેટ સિનારિયો જ્યારે આપણે બિલિંગ જીએસટી સાથેનું કર્યું, at that juncture he is entitled to claim an input tax credit or not? The answer to that question is yes, he can very well avail an input tax credit. Considering section 16.2 કે એમાં કોઈ જગ્યાએ એવું નથી લખ્યું કે ક્રેડિટ એને ત્યારે અવેલ કરવાની, મીન્સ કે ઇન્વોઇસ આવે ત્યારે એને ક્રેડિટ અવેલ કરવાની છે. રિસિપ્ટ કયા વર્ષમાં કરી છે એને કોઈ રિલેવન્સી પ્રોવિઝન સાથે છે નહીં. સો ફાર એઝ સેક્શન 16.4નું રિસ્ટ્રિક્શન જોઈએ તો એ રિસ્ટ્રિક્શનની અંદર અમેન્ડમેન્ટ થઈ ગયું છે અને એ અમેન્ડમેન્ટ આઈ એમ નોટ રીડિંગ બટ ધ રિલેવન્ટ વર્ડ આઈ એમ રિફરિંગ. For the month of September following the end of financial year to which such invoice or debit note pertains. જે વર્ષ રિલેટેડ જે એ ડેબિટ નોટ હોય એ રિલેટેડ આપણે ક્રેડિટ હવે અવેલ કરી શકીએ છીએ અને રેટ્રોસ્પેક્ટિવ એમેન્ડમેન્ટ આઈ થિંક થયેલું છે. સો ધેટ ઇઝ વાય કન્સિડરિંગ ધેટ એમેન્ડમેન્ટ ભલે આપણને સર્વિસ આપણે પાસ્ટ ફાઇનાન્શિયલ યરમાં રિસીવ કરી હોય અને એનું ફિઝિકલ ઇન્વોઇસ સબસિક્વન્ટ યરમાં આવ્યું હોય તો પણ ડેફિનેટલી આપણે ક્રેડિટ અવેલ કરી શકશું. થેન્ક યુ. હા સર્ચના કેસમાં સેક્શન 17.5 ની અંદર રિસ્ટ્રિક્શન છે ને લાસ્ટ આઈ થિંક.
Company is registered in Madhya Pradesh. Mrs. Clean Energy Limited is having a principal place of business in Madhya Pradesh and is engaged in importing coal and supply to a local purchaser. Clean Energy imports the coal through Kandla Mundra port located in Gujarat and supply to its customer located in Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, charging IGST on such supply. Clean Energy charge CGST, SGST when it supplies the goods to customer located in Madhya Pradesh. Now the question whether GST officer has asked the Clean Energy to register in Gujarat and discharge his appropriate GST. You are requested to guide him. And do you see any probability of denial of ITC to Mr. Clean Energy by GST officer in Madhya Pradesh on the ground that the goods are not received by the Clean Energy? This is a question with reference to section 22 of CGST, section 10 of IGST and section 16 of CGST for claiming the input tax credit. હું straightway reply પર જતો રહું છું. Without discussing the provision, everybody knows under as per section 22 when the registration is required to be obtained. We have on the similar facts, we have the 3 advance ruling, 2 from the Maharashtra AAR authority and 1 from the Karnataka, and they have categorically said and unanimous decision that under such circumstances when you are importing the goods from a place which is only for the place of importing and you are paying the customs also. So section, as per section 16, you are entitled for tax on the imports also, which you are paid as an IGST. And if you are directly supplying the goods from that particular port to the location of the customer, we know which may not be the place where you are registered, then IGST is leviable. You does not require to have the registration at the place where you are importing the goods. So we have the three advance ruling judgment. One is the Son Kamal Enterprise Limited of Maharashtra. Another is RL Imports Exports Private Limited again of Maharashtra, and Cardex India Storage Solution Private Limited of Karnataka. Both these different advance ruling authority has unanimously given the same ruling. Thank you. Now, as far as this another question about whether Gujarat can ask Clean Energy to take the registration, answer is no. There is no requirement in the law. And as far as the MP Madhya Pradesh is saying that you are not importing to the state where you are registered, whether they can deny the input tax credit, again his answer is no.
14 નંબર, જ્યારે કન્સ્ટ્રક્શન કરીએ ત્યારે એક્સ્ટ્રા એફએસઆઈ મ્યુનિસિપાલિટી અને ઓડા પાસેથી આપણે લઈએ છીએ, તો સર્વિસીસ રિસીવ્ડ ફ્રોમ ગવર્મેન્ટ રિવર્સ ચાર્જ મિકેનિઝમમાં ટેક્સ ભરવો પડે કે ના ભરવો પડે. એક નોટિફિકેશન છે, નોટિફિકેશન 14/2017. એ કહે છે કે જ્યારે પણ કોઈ પણ ગવર્મેન્ટ મ્યુનિસિપલ ઓથોરિટી એમની પાસેથી આપણે કોઈ પણ સર્વિસ લઈએ અને એ સર્વિસ આર્ટિકલ 243G અને આર્ટિકલ 243W કવર હોય, તો એવા કિસ્સામાં એને ગુડ્સ કે સર્વિસ બેમાંથી કંઈ પણ નહીં ગણવાનું, એટલે કે એના ઉપર જીએસટી નહીં ભરવાનો. કોન્સ્ટિટ્યુશન ઓફ ઇન્ડિયામાં આર્ટિકલ ઓફ 243G અને W જોશે તો એમાં અર્બન ડેવલપમેન્ટ અને કન્સ્ટ્રક્શન ઓફ બિલ્ડિંગ બંને કવર છે. એટલા માટે આના ઉપર જીએસટી ભરવાની જરૂર નથી કોઈએ નહીં, ના તો મ્યુનિસિપાલિટીએ કે ના બિંગ અ રિસિપિયન્ટ ઓફ ધ સર્વિસ આપણે. ડોન્ટ ગેટ ઇટ કન્ફ્યુઝડ વિથ અ ટ્રેડિંગ ઓફ એન એફએસઆઈ. જ્યારે એક્સ્ટ્રા એફએસઆઈ આપણે કોઈ બીજા બિલ્ડર પાસેથી લઈએ છીએ ત્યારની વાત નથી થતી. આ જ્યારે મ્યુનિસિપાલિટી અને ઓડા એમની પાસેથી આપણે લઈએ છીએ ત્યારે જ આ એક્ઝેમ્પશનનો બેનિફિટ, એક્ઝેમ્પશન નહીં પણ નાઇધર સપ્લાય ઓફ ગુડ્સ નોર સપ્લાય ઓફ ટેક્સેબલ સર્વિસ, ત્યારે એપ્લિકેબલ થશે. કોઈએ ટેક્સ ભરવાની જરૂર નથી.
Next poser is with relation to the motor vehicle and the restriction under section 17(5) clause A. The poser and the question which is raised before me is that I have procured a vehicle which is having the capacity of less than 13 passengers. I am utilizing that particular motor vehicle for the purpose of providing my services of repair and maintenance. Now whether that credit is allowed to me, I have already availed the credit. Now the question again revolves around the discussion which we already had. Availment or utilization, how it is interpreted. As per me, commercial steel or the provision of the law section 50 subsection 1, 2 and 3, whatever. My submission would be, if you have availed, I would interpret and utilized or not utilized. I have availed but not utilized in this situation. The answer is interest will not be applicable, but yes, reversal may be required because the credit which you have taken is specifically blocked by virtue of a provision of the law. Unless that is read down, yes, reversal is required. Second question is that in case I have utilized, then what will happen? Again, I would say, as we have already discussed, the interest, my submission is interest still will not be applicable because there is no provision, there is no statutory power of levying interest on reversal of credits as per me. Now, there can be one aspect of it wherein a Shokas notice can be issued to me under section 74 or section 73, whatever. Now, in that case, they may ask me for, or they can issue a Shokas notice for reversal or rather for wrongful utilization or availment of the input tax credit. Again, the answer would be the interest is not applicable because it has to be read with section 50 and therefore the interest will not be applicable. So, in none of the situations, the interest applicability would be there, but certainly there can be a chance or a probability of implication of penalty into it. That is my submission. Thank you.
The next question is almost one with Samir sir has already discussed, that up to what time you can raise the invoices. Now, many of you have come across certain situations where this GST officers are auditing the books of account, and they are saying that if you have a branches, then you should have distributed some credit through ISD, or the cross charging should have been done. People generally have no problem in doing this, and we are also not going to discuss whether it should have been done through ISD or cross charge. The only thing is that, say for example, accepting the contention of the revenue officer, you are now intending to raise the invoice. And whether the recipient unit will get the credit or not, that's the issue. Because section 16(4) says, a registered person shall not be entitled to take input tax credit in the respect of any invoice or a debit note for a supply of goods or services or both after the due date of furnishing of the return under section 39 for the month of September following the end of financial year to which such invoice or a debit note pertains. Now, question is, when they have used this phrase, to which such invoice or debit note pertains, means pertaining to the year in which the supply was ought to be made or the year in which I am raising the invoice. Now, there is a provision in this also, they have amended this section, and they have debit note also is included in this provision. Earlier, prior to this amendment, they have said that the invoice, if you are raising the debit notes subsequently, then it will relate back to the invoice originally raised by you. So say for example, you have raised one invoice on 17-18. Now today, due to the settlement of your agreement, that escalation of the price, you are raising the debit note today on your customer that originally you paid me some short consideration. If you raise the debit note today, you will charge the GST, but the recipient will not get the credit because there is a specific linking of that invoice and debit note. Now that linking has been done away with, that there is no need to link. Therefore, when the phrase used is invoice or a debit note pertains to, means the year in which you are making the supply. So you are raising the invoice today in 2021, then the last date of availing this credit would be the date on which you are filing your return under section 39, that is 20th October 2021. There is no problem into this. Now, one important thing I would like to just bring to your notice, I don't know how many of you have gone through this amendment from 1st January 2021. Puneet bhai, this I also would like to bring to your notice this also, that this section says that furnishing of the return under section 39 for the month of September. Now, all of you are aware that Avinash sir argued before the Honorable Gujarat High Court in case of AAP and company, and he succeeded also that GSTR 3B is not a return as prescribed under section 39. Right? Everybody, all of us are aware about that decision. And that forced the government to amend the law retrospectively. Now, my submission is, wherever they have amended the law retrospectively, still there is a chance to say that this retrospective amendment is also not working in their favor. Why I am saying so? You look at the amended rules 61 from 1st January 2021, they are nowhere referring to GSTR 3. They are everywhere now, they are referring to GSTR 3B. I have got the copy of the earlier rule prior to 1st January 2021. They say that everywhere they are simply saying that 3B, rules 61(1) says that GSTR 3. Only where it comes to this proviso to rule 5, it simply says that provided that where a return in GSTR 3B is required to be furnished by a person referred to in sub-rule 1, then such person shall not require to furnish form GSTR 3. It means only substitution. It does not say that whatever the 3B you are furnishing is under 39. So that particular provision was totally absent up to 31st December 2020. Entire rule has been substituted. So now there are some force in their argument that yes, now 3B, because everywhere in old rule 61, everywhere they refer to only 3. At one place they refer to 3B, that is also substitution. When you are filing 3B, don't file 3, that's all. They are not saying that 3B you are filing is under section 39. So according to me, even if you go by the section, when you have filed the month of September following the end of the financial year, that event has not triggered at all. And all probability you will succeed in this, that you can still avail the credit. So wherever you have a problem that for the past period you have not raised the invoice, you can raise the invoice today. In this particular poser, it's a kind of a service which the HO provides to the branches. Let us assume that there is a service, element of service at all. Then it would fall into continuous supply of services. In a continuous supply of services, it's up to you that when you want to determine the event where you need to make the payment. So I have determined the event today that I have provided services to my branch in 2017, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. I am raising the invoice today. So time of supply is also today. I will raise the invoice today. I will not pay interest. My recipient will get the credit. That is what my suggestion is.
The next poser, poser number 17, our VAT, it is related to the VAT assessment. Many a times we have found that in the assessment years, assessment period 17-18, if we avail a credit in Tran 1 and if we are not having an excess credit under the VAT Act, at that time the assessing authority is adding that credit under the VAT Act and creating the liability with interest and penalty under the VAT Act. Reason behind that is that you have availed a credit in Tran 1 and you are not having an excess credit under the VAT Act. Therefore, that credit is required to be added here and extra liability is required to be generated against the assessee with interest and penalty. So, in that scenario, whether the assessing authority is right and what to do? The answer is the Cosmos International Supreme Court judgment, basically a tribunal judgment and thereafter Gujarat High Court judgment and thereafter Supreme Court judgment in case of a Cosmos International which speaks that Section 13 of the VAT Act and Rule 18 speaks that wherever if your taxpayer is having an excess credit, then it should be adjusted towards the output liability, and thereafter if excess credit is there, then it can be carry forwarded under the next financial year or in under the GST era. So if the taxpayer is not having an excess credit, then in that scenario the assessing authority has no right to get back the whatever credit you claim in Tran 1, that cannot be given you as a credit under the VAT assessment. And therefore, looking to the judgment of Cosmos International, Section 13 rule, read with Rule 18, the action of the assessing authority is totally not tenable and not required to be done. So far as GST, reversal of credit under the GST Act, when we discussing this poser, then Jigar Bhai says that you don't allow them to reverse the credit under the VAT Act and I don't allow them to reverse the credit under the GST Act. Basically, they have no power, they have no power to make an assessment of a Tran 1. So, you are having a win-win situation in both the cases, but you have to fight. Thank you.
There is no provision under the GST law which can ask you to reverse or recover the credit you have already transitioned. There is no such provision. So even if wrongly you have transitioned, once it is transitioned, it is up to you what you want to do. You can utilize also. So many problems you have seen. Credit taken, utilize, no interest, everything in your favor.
કેટલા વર્ષ રાહ દેખવી પડશે પછી? Next question is, Skyline developers collect car parking, maintenance charges, ODA AMC charges, legal charges, maintenance deposit from the buyer of residential unit which are subject to GST at 1% or 5%. Are the above charges collected subject to GST? If yes, at what rate? આમ તો પેપર ફૂટી ગયું છે, નીચે જવાબ લખેલો જ છે, ડિલીટ કરવાનું રહી ગયું હતું. Anyway, there are two situations. One situation is post 1st April 2019. Another situation is pre-April 2019. Post situation માં વાત કરીએ તો we have the notification 11, we have the entry number 3, and they also provided the explanation. And if we go and read the explanation, Roman 16, and if we read the part C, I am reading, where the gross amount shall be the sum. That explanation basically mean to say what is meant by affordable residential apartment. And everybody knows that for affordable residential apartment, we have the 45 lakh rupee criteria corresponding to the square meter criteria also, 60 meters for the metro city and 90 square meter for other than those. Other than that, they have also tried to explain or clarify the situation, what will be included in this 45 lakh rupees. They said that gross amount shall be the sum total of consideration charged for the services specified in item 1 to 1C of the column 3 of serial number 3, that is for the flat, amount charged for the transfer of land or undivided share of land, as the case may be, including by way of lease or sublease, because particularly we can say that in Gujarat we have the undivided share of the land is also transferred to the flat owner. And the C, which is most important, is for the amenities, that any other amount charged by the promoter from the buyer of the apartment, including the preferential location charges, development charges, parking charges, common facility charges, etc. So, including all the three, if your consideration is below 45 lakh, then and then only you fall into the affordable residential apartment, and then the 1% would be leviable. If it is more than that, if it crosses the 45 lakh, then the tax would be 5%. Now the question, this is after 1st April 2019. What is the situation pre-April 2019? There were the certain notices or some doubt were raised that in case of a preferential location charges, the rate of tax would be 18% and you will not get the deduction of the land value, or it will not be considered as the composite supply, and as this being the separate charges which you are paying to the developer, you need to discharge your liability at 18%, and for the rest of the things you will be get the deduction of 1/3 and 12% is required to be charged. But according to me, that view is not correct. Now department themselves has clarified this situation by way of explanation, and they said that for every this consideration of parking and preferential location and common facility charges, it will be included in the sale consideration. So things are very much clear from the department also, that if it is below 45 lakh, 1%, above 45 lakh, 5%. Thank you. ના ના, એની અંદર બીજી કન્ડિશન એ બી છે કે તમારો 50% કે મોર ઓફ ધ FSI શુડ બી યુઝ ફોર ધ ધીસ એફોર્ડેબલ, તો જ તમે યુ ફોલ ઇન્ટુ 5% એન્ડ 1% ફોર ધ રેસિડેન્શિયલ એપાર્ટમેન્ટ. હા હા હા, કરેક્ટ કરેક્ટ. Then your scheme does not fall into the this 1%, then you fall into the 5% criteria. તો 5%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ના 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 ના, એક મિનિટ. એટલે ટ્રસ્ટી ડોન્ટ ટ્રસ્ટ ઇચ અધર, ડેફિનેટલી. એટલે કદાચ અમે બંને જુદું જુદું સમજ્યા. તમારું કહેવાનું એવું છે કે તમારી સ્કીમમાં 20% કોમર્શિયલ છે અને 80% રેસિડેન્શિયલ છે. તો 80% રેસિડેન્શિયલ ઉપર 1% લાગશે કે 5% લાગશે કે ખાલી 5% લાગશે? 1% કે 5% જે પ્રમાણે તમારી સ્કીમ હોય એ પ્રમાણે. એટલે માની લો કે 80માંથી 50% યુનિટો છે એ નાના છે, બરાબર છે, તો એમાં ઉપર 1%, બાકીના 30 જે છે 30%ના યુનિટો એવા છે કે જેમાં મોટા યુનિટ છે, એટલે 90 વાર કે 60 વાર જે બી કેસ હોય એના કરતાં મોટા યુનિટ છે, તો એવામાં 5% લાગશે. એટલે એક જ સ્કીમમાં તમારી 3 સ્કીમ ચાલશે, 1%, 5% અને 12%. કોમર્શિયલ માટે 12%, મોટા યુનિટ રેસિડેન્શિયલ માટે 5%. બિલકુલ, તમારો મોટો સવાલ હવે આવશે. તો એના માટે FAQમાં લખેલું છે કે પ્રોપોર્શનેટલી કાર્પેટ એરિયા પ્રમાણે ફોલો કરો. FAQ છે ને, ઇસ્યુ થયા છે 2 FAQ છે. તમારે કોઈ સ્કીમ હોય તો 2 FAQ રિયલ એસ્ટેટ ઉપર બેક ટુ બેક ઇસ્યુ થયા છે, લગભગ 80 જેટલા સવાલ છે, 50 જેટલા. બહુ ફાઇન છે. એમાં લખેલું છે કે આવું હોય ત્યારે લો ક્લિયર નથી શું કરવું જોઈએ, પણ એમાં FAQમાં લખેલું છે કે કાર્પેટ એરિયા પ્રમાણે ફોલો કરો. એટલે કે માની લો ટોટલ તમારી ક્રેડિટ 1 કરોડ હોય તો તમારા કિસ્સામાં 20 લાખ રૂપિયાની ક્રેડિટ લો, બાકીની 80 ભૂલી જાઓ. ઓકે, મારો ટર્ન. Mr. Late Limited is not able to file GSTR 99C. GST ઓડિટની ડેડલાઇન જતી રહી, શું થશે? સવાલ એ છે. એક તો 200 રૂપિયા પર ડે પેનલ્ટી આવશે, લિમિટેડ ટુ 0.5% ઓફ ટર્નઓવર, બરાબર? એવરીબડી એગ્રીઝ ટુ દેટ. અને we have to understand that GSTR 9C is not a return itself. It is actually an audit report which is to be filed along with the GSTR 9. તો જ્યારે પણ સિસ્ટમ એવું અલાઉ કરે છે કે તમે GSTR 9 ભરો અને 9C ન ભરો, કરેક્ટ, એવું સિસ્ટમ અલાઉ કરે છે અત્યારે બી, તો એમનો વાંક એ લોકો ભોગવે એવું બી કહી શકાય. તો તમે GSTR 9 ટાઈમસર ફાઇલ કરી દીધું હોય તો કોઈ પણ જાતની લેટ ફી અત્યારે નહીં લાગે, 9C ભરવાનું બાકી હોય તો બી. હવે સવાલ એ થાય કે તમે GSTR 9C લેટ કર્યું એની કોઈ પેનલ્ટી થઈ શકે કે નહીં? કોઈ સ્પેસિફિક પેનલ્ટી નથી, એટલે સેક્શન 125ની જનરલ પેનલ્ટી છે એ લાગી શકે. પણ સેક્શન 125ની જે જનરલ પેનલ્ટી છે એ કોઈ પણ દિવસ સોકોઝ નોટિસ ઇસ્યુ કર્યા વગર ના લાગી શકે. કરેક્ટ? એટલે એના માટે સોકોઝ નોટિસ ઇસ્યુ કરવી પડે, સામેથી ક્લાયન્ટને પેમેન્ટ કરાવવાની પેનલ્ટીની જરૂર નથી. તો એ સેક્શન 125માં કેટલી પેનલ્ટી છે? મેક્સિમમ 50,000 રૂપિયા. દેટ ઇઝ મેક્સિમમ 50,000 રૂપિયા. તો અગેન જો સેક્શન 125માં પેનલ્ટી નાખવી હોય તો સેક્શન 126 વિલ કમ ઇન ટુ પ્લે. સેક્શન 126 કહે છે કે જો માઇનોર બ્રીચ હોય અને રેક્ટિફાયેબલ હોય તો એવા કિસ્સામાં પેનલ્ટી ના નાખવી જોઈએ. તો ડિફિકલ્ટ થશે ડિપાર્ટમેન્ટ માટે કે જ્યારે એરર ઓલરેડી રેક્ટિફાઈ થઈ ગઈ છે ત્યાર પછી સોકોઝ ઇસ્યુ કરે અને ફરી પાછી પેનલ્ટી એના ઉપર ઇમ્પોઝ કરે. That will be difficult. But yes, they can issue the SOCOS notice and court may held that you are required to pay the penalty up to 50,000 rupees legally. But it will be very difficult and a rare case according to me. Next.
Next is again a practical issue which is being faced by many of us. Like what they are doing is they are issuing a SOCOS notice online, DRC 01. There is a process which is there specified in the procedures, which is in the CGST rules, Rule 142, which says DRC 01A needs to be issued in case it is section 73 or 74. Let us forget that they have issued DRC 1A or not. The question which is posed here is that they have issued DRC 01 under section 73, and I as a taxpayer have replied back to them that yes, I am in requirement of some time, please allow me some time to reply back to that SOCOS notice. Along with that, I have also requested for personal hearing. Now, in many of the cases, they are not giving any attention to this kind of submissions that we are making. So, what is the legal support given to us, whether there is any support in the statute or not? Certainly, there is a support, section 75, subsection 4, if I am not wrong. That is the provision which says that if the taxpayer requests that he needs a personal hearing to be given, then the personal hearing is mandated. He must be provided that opportunity. There is already various judgments of various high courts in GST regime. It's not about the prior regime of natural justice and all. It's in the GST regime, like even Gujarat High Court in case of Alchem Laboratories Limited versus Union of India. It's a judgment wherein the Honorable Gujarat High Court have said that yes, if the proper opportunity of hearing is not given, and if the taxpayer has asked for that personal hearing and then also it has been avoided by the authorities, then the order needs to be quashed. Another very important point which I would like to raise here is that law says 3 opportunity must be given. Now generally we find a SOCOS notice and a notice for personal hearing which says you can appear on 1st, you can appear on 8th, you can appear on 15th. Now, is it to be considered at 3 dates or 3 opportunities or 1? As per my submission, it is 1. It is not 3. Because my submission would be, once a date is given, I make a submission that because of these reasons, these genuine causes, I am not able to appear before your good self, and therefore I need an adjournment. You cannot allot me a new date. And therefore, this also can come to our rescue when we are arguing such kind of issues, wherein the opportunity per se is not given to us, and the personal hearing even asked for has a statutory provision under section 75 subsection 4 which says if you ask for that, it has to be provided. Otherwise, the order needs to be quashed. Now at which stage, whether it will be quashed by the departmental officers or not, the appellate forum is going to do that or not, I'll not speak anything on that because we all are aware how that is going to happen and how it is going to be difficult for all of us to face that 10% or 20% of the pre-deposit for fighting the genuine cases.
But sir, in that case also, my suggestion is that appeal should be preferred within the time limit, because in a GST law as well as under the excise law and service tax law, there was a provision that when you have to file the appeal before the first appellate authority, then the time limit given is sacrosanct. So in service tax and excise, there was a time of 2 months. Now in GST, there is a time of 3 months. Now, if you forget to file the appeal within 3 months and the condonation period of 30 days is also over, then nobody can save you. Supreme Court recently in July 2020 has given a decision in case of GlaxoSmithKline where says that SSE cannot even go under the Article 226 to the High Court and say that my delay can be condoned. So they have specifically referred our Gujarat High Court decision, larger bench of the Gujarat High Court decision in case of Panoli intermediates, and they have said that now you have a complaint that I specifically asked for the opportunity of being heard. The officer has not followed that, and in violation of principle of natural justice, he passed the order. Now, Supreme Court says that even in those cases also, if you want to challenge that he has violated the principle of natural justice, then you go before the High Court within the time limit prescribed. So if you have taken that action within 3 months, then your writ petition is maintainable. High Court will decide whether to send you back to the adjudicating authority. But if you are going after the condonation period is also over, after 3 months, then nobody can save you. Then even High Court cannot entertain that writ petition. So what is the scope of High Court under Article 226? GlaxoSmithKline has detailed discussion. So you want to just understand that what is the provision for Article 226 knocking the door of the High Court, that decision will help you.
Just one addition to this, as rightly mentioned by sir, one judgment is there of Gujarat Petronet Limited of Honorable Gujarat High Court, wherein Gujarat High Court has said, if order is not uploaded, because we all are facing this kind of issue, that order is not uploaded online. The Honorable Court has said the limitation period of 3 months will not start. So there are many cases which we are assuming that time has lapsed. But still we can go and check it online. If that report is not there or order is not uploaded online on time, then still the limitation is there. How it is going to survive, I don't comment on that, but
Yes,
that order is there to support you. in Gujarat.
Series of decisions on the same point by Madhya Pradesh High Court also. They said that the order is not uploaded online because the time limit for filing the appeal will start from the receipt of the order. Now there is a specific mechanism provided under the law that how you will serve the order. They say that you upload the order, then only it will be service is complete. Now there are, in past also all these things have happened, that the department will serve the copy of that to the security guard of the company. Whether that is a service of the order, Supreme Court says no, it's not a service of the order. So how you can say that service of the order, then your time limit will start. Sir.
ઓફિસર દ્વારા મેન્યુઅલી DRC 01A ઇશ્યુ કરવામાં આવશે ફર્સ્ટ ટાઈમ વેરી ફર્સ્ટ DRC 01A then we find DRC
Part B.
part B then is issued directly in online DRC 07 so it is possible.
Sir, first and foremost, DRC 01A has to be issued electronically. That is mandatory because Part B also has to be filed electronically. DRC 1 is the second stage. After DRC 01A, DRC 1 is a summary of show cause notice. Now what they are doing is they are only issuing DRC 1. They are not issuing any show cause notice to that. And if we read, there are a lot of master circulars wherein it has been said what will be the content that needs to be mandated, that needs to be there in the show cause notice. Service tax, I think in March 2017 there was a master circular which said आपके show cause notice में ये सारे parameters होने चाहिए. So we can certainly challenge that.
10th March 2017.
10th March 2017.
And there are series of decisions of Gujarat High Court also that in this kind of show cause notices, the SSC preferred the writ petition before High Court. High Court said that this show cause notice is beyond comprehension. What are the allegations you are mentioning? Nothing is clear. How the SSC can answer this? You simply says that I have evaded the payment of tax, but on what ground I have evaded? At least you let me know. So that also has been struck down.
So DRC 7 is likely to be cost.
Sir, the last process for I will not take much time because it's a export of goods. Somehow, I don't know. Okay, this Bowser 20, this printing error is 21 I am referring to because 20 is printed twice. So this is basically the poser on export of goods. 23rd March 2020, they inserted one rule called as 96B. They say that if you don't receive the consideration for export of goods, then we will recover the refund already granted to you. Now there is no parentage to this rule. There is no section. If you look at the definition of export of goods, it simply says that taking out of the India is export of goods. The event of export of goods is complete. If you look at the definition of export of service, it has a condition that you must receive the consideration in convertible foreign currency. Then the export of service is complete. But somehow it is in the mind of the government, they say that if you don't receive the consideration, then we will recover this refund. So they inserted this 96B. According to me, there is no parentage to this rule. This rule is absolutely beyond section, and we need not have any proposition. Honorable Gujarat High Court has held in so many decisions. Intercontinental consultants in the context of service tax, where the Supreme Court has dealt with this proposition elaborately, where said that if the rules are enacted without any parentage of the section, then these rules are to be ignored. You have to treat this as a non-est, means it is not there in the statute book. Now, okay. If I have left with 5 minutes, then I will complete my poser. Okay. Okay. So in that case, the 96B, they have the provision. Now they have proposed to amend the section 16.12. See the mentality of the government. They don't want to amend the definition of export of goods. They still would like to continue with the definition that taking out of India is export of goods. They don't want to tinker with that. Now under the IGST provision in section 16, they are now proposing to insert that if you don't receive the convertible foreign currency, then it will not be treated as a zero rated supply. Therefore, they will recover it. Now the question is, when say for example, this rule is valid, let us assume for a moment, then the 96B, it was inserted from 23rd March 2020. If you have exported the goods in February 2020, you have filed the refund claim in February 2020, then whether this rule will be applicable or not. The answer is no, because this rule does not have a retrospective effect. In fact, this similar kind of problem arose in context of Rule 5 of the Sandwich Credit Rules, where also the refund mechanism was there if you are exporting the goods or services. Originally, the refund was allowed only of the goods, not of the services. Then they, from 13th March 2006, they said that now onwards, we will give you the refund of input services also. On a March 20, 2006, when SSC filed the refund claim, he also claimed the refund of input services. Then the department said that we cannot give you the refund of input services because your goods were exported prior to this amendment in the notification, and therefore will not give. There the tribunal in case of WNS Global, that has been affirmed by the Bombay High Court also, it says that it's not a retrospective amendment, but it is giving benefit of the antecedent facts. So at the time when the SSC claimed the refund, the law applicable on that date will be applying. So at that point of time when he filed the refund claim, the refund of input services is also eligible. Therefore, we will give the refund even though the goods are exported prior to that. Now that proposition will exactly come against you in this type of cases where you have exported the goods in February 2020, but you are claiming the refund after 23rd March 2020 when this rule is into force. Let us assume for a moment that this rule is valid. Then department can say that if you don't receive the convertible foreign currency within the time limit given to you, then that refund can be recovered. But as I said, it is absolutely beyond the section, and you can treat this as a non-est. It's a good point for contesting with the department. And is already challenged. Sir has, in fact, he has left only the GST Act itself to be challenged, but everything is otherwise challenged. So my view is that this is not as such not a good law, but now they have proposed to amend the section itself, section 16 of the IGST Act. Thereafter, they may have a case. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Shah, Dr. Priyam Shah, Advocate Samir Sitpuria, CA Punit Prajapati. I request everyone to please be seated. We will take only next 10 minutes to wind it up and to maintain the decorum. For gracing the final Brains Trust session of the Tax Conclave 2021, let's have a huge round of applause for the panelists who are here. I would now request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly come forward for a group photograph. Later on? Okay. So first we would like to thank our conclave partners. The supporters will felicitate the conclave supporters here, and I would now request Advocate Ashutosh Thakkar, President ITBA, CA Vishwesh Shah, Honorary Secretary AGFTC, CA Ashish Tekwani, Honorary Secretary ITBA, and Advocate Bharat Sheth, President AGFTC, to kindly come forward to felicitate the conclave partners as I call out their names. Starting with Indus University and WIIA. If there is a representative from Indus University and WIIA.
અને આ કાર્યક્રમનું સુંદર સંચાલન બદલ પણ એમને માસ્ટર ઓફ સેરેમની માટે પણ એમને આમંત્રિત કરીએ છીએ.
Please give a big round of applause for our MOC. She has done excellent job. Let me introduce her. She has got a doctorate in English, and she is a proud faculty at Indus University. So she is not an ordinary lady. She is a PhD and doctor.
થેન્ક યુ.
Followed by Taxopaid, by Best. Do we have representatives from by Best, Taxopaid, Clear Tax? Kindly come forward to the stage. All the conclave partners, those who are here. Clear Tax. Please, let's have the applause going for all the conclave partner supporters here. Clear Tax, SBI Card, Swami Energy, let's hear it for Clear Tax. Magnanimous Infrastructure Private Limited. Let's give a huge round of applause for all the conclave supporters. The SBI Card. Let's hear it for SBI Card as a conclave supporter.
And secretaries of both the association, they are the key contributors. And I request past presidents of AGFTC and Income Tax Bar Association to felicitate these 4 key persons without whom this tax conclave cannot be a reality. After COVID, these 4 people have dared to organize this 2-day tax conclave. And please, friend, give a big round of applause, because no other association, tax association, has organized this kind of conclave, not even Ahmedabad branch and CA association. So we are taking proud, all Gujarat and Income Tax Bar is taking proud that we have arranged, after COVID-19, we have dared to arrange this kind of tax conclave. And this is reality. Thank you.
Let us applaud wholeheartedly the entire team for their exemplary efforts, the entire team of AGFTC and ITBA. This event would not have seen the light of the day if it was not for the determined dedication of both these organizations. Let's hear it once again for both the organizations together. Let's hear it for the President. Secretary, Honorable Secretary Vishwesh Shah, sir. Let's hear it for Vishwesh Shah, sir. Honorable Secretary ITBA. Let's hear it for Ashish Tekwani.
So I mean that, thank you so much participants. We are also.
Ajit Shah, sir, Convener Tax Conclave. I request the entire team to kindly come forward for a group photograph. I request the entire team to kindly come forward for a group photograph. To Bakul, sir. Kartikesh Shah. Sir, let's hear it for Dhruven, sir. I would request the dignitaries on the stage and off the stage for a group photograph.